Hello there, listeners in the dark, and welcome to this, the Large Blast podcast, Lionel Johnson edition. And I'm your host, Stoney, joined as always by Matt.
Gonna hear me roar.
And Welshie.
Look, Lionel, everything the light touches is our kingdom. A king's time as a ruler rises and falls like the sun. One day, Lion, the sun will set on my time here and will rise with you as the new king. All of this will be yours. That's a quote from the Lionel Johnson King.
Well, Hakuna Matata. That's a quote from the new Dan Abnett book, and we're ready to rock here at the Large Blast podcast. And we like to kick things off with a little something we call Hobbies Goings On, where we have a little look at what's been going on in the hosts' lives. So, Welshie, what's been going on with you? What have you been up to hobby-wise?
I've been painting a couple of obliterators that I've really enjoyed. Some of my favourite models from like the new Chaos range. So I've done them like my Emperor's Children.
Cool. So these aren't the old school, big, beefy, weird twisted obliterators, are they? They're the newer ones.
Yeah, they're slightly newer, but they're
plastic.
they're plastic. They're way better looking than the old kind of janky metal ones. Just the way they're just so well sculpted. You can see all of the different weapon types like literally bursting from the skin and through the armor plates, and you can kind of notice, oh, that's gonna grow into a plasma gun, that's gonna grow into a melter gun. They're
a cool size, aren't they? Because they're somewhere between a Terminator and a Dreadnought, so they're a
like
nice big
50
chunky
mil
size.
base. And I don't think, I might be wrong about this, but I don't think they ever actually have even been released like as their own separate box. I think they just came in one of the big Chaos boxes.
Oh, really?
I don't think you can get them.
They're like a core Chaos unit when I think of the Chaos Space Marine Army.
I actually built them because I wanted to include them in the boarding actions game I played on Saturday with long-time listener Jimmy Bignuts. And I built them and found out after I built them that they were heavy support unit, and you can't use heavy support in boarding actions, so it's a complete waste of time. But yeah, I mean, it serves me right for trying to bring an OP unit to a board game. The
50 mil base should have given it away, surely.
It basically just blocks the entire corridor with one model. And then I've been building the my RBT's kill team, which has been traumatic because they each have, everyone in the box has 3 different weapon selections, and they all look great. So I'm having to magnetize. That's like 8 magnets per model. Yeah, they'll be done soon. I'm really looking forward to painting them. I'm going to paint them in proper classic 2000 AD bright green boots, Judge Dredd style. Bright green boots, bright gold armor. So I'm quite looking forward to that.
How many times have you got to the 7th magnet and realised you put it in the wrong way round?
I'm about 14 magnets in, and I've got 1 the wrong way round.
That's pretty good. That's not bad.
It's not too bad.
Yeah.
I've got a pretty good system now.
Are you doing that for every model?
Every model.
Oh my God. The painting's going to be a nightmare.
Yeah. But I'll do what I normally do. What I normally do when I make these magnetic teams
just paint one arm.
I'll paint the ones I like the best, and then I'll put all the rest in a box, and at some point I'll go back and paint them. Or if I realize that they work a lot better with one weapon than the other, I'll paint up the better weapon, you know. So yeah, that's been really fun. I really like those models, and I had another good game with boarding actions with someone who'd never played boarding actions, who I think enjoyed themselves. It's just so easy. If you come in with a basic knowledge of 40k, it's easy to pick up and play.
Well, Matt, do I dare ask what you've been up to on your hobby progress? Have you been painting planks of wood in the theme of a Edwardian night? Well, whatever. What have you been up to?
I went to see my mum, and she'd thrown away my polystyrene collection.
What?
Can you believe it?
Oh, mate.
I know.
Have you heard? Not terrain yet. This is pre-turning into terrain, just in case you need it.
That's even worse. That's like raw gold. Do you know? I've heard that. Was it Macaulay Culkin who got emancipated from his parents? You want to get his lawyer on the phone because it's time throwing away your polystyrene. It was decades of polystyrene. God. But hey, I mean,
there's
an old Packard Bell's worth of polystyrene in there.
I've got a utility
stuff. Room full here if ever you need it. That Ruby tries to throw away. So
to be fair, I've got a Brighton collection now, so it's probably for the best that I don't have 2 different collections. Yeah, polystyrene collections. We all have them. I've been playing more Blackstone Fortress. Completed another stronghold, so kind of halfway through completing the game, which is good. We've kind of got it down to a team. Me and my friend, we we've got it down to a point where it really plays like a computer game, which I think is kind of how they marketed it originally. It's really good.
Is it getting harder as you progress? Because I remember the first game we played was kind of like was a bit easy, a bit of a walkthrough.
We've been quite clever. We got our A team down, so like, and we're getting more and more equipment for them, so they're good. The game itself is getting harder, but we're kind of still one up on the game. When we're in the missions, we're kind of, we're kind of 2 steps ahead, where we're thinking like, oh, we can trick the robotics of the game to do this, and then we can do this. Like when you do a computer game and you kind of know a mission, and then you know where the baddie's going to be, or you can separate the boss from his protectors. We've done stuff like that. Yeah, it's quite good. It's quite thematic, but that's been pretty good. And then doing the usual, painting some Bretts, painting some sisters. And I kind of been flicking through my 9th edition rulebook, because I don't know if this sounds weird, but I kind of don't feel like I know the book. The 8th edition one as well, kind of, because the editions are only out for like 3 years. I remember always flicking through the old school rule books, and you kind of know the law book.
Presumably you're not trying to learn rules with 3 months
ago. The physical book, like looking at the pictures. What do they call it? The page furniture. Yeah, it's different in each edition. You kind of get familiar with the book. You know what the sections are. I'm looking at the 9th edition rulebook, and I'm like, man, I've played loads of Warhammer using this rule set, but I don't know the book. And now it's going to be just like put in the loft when the 10th edition comes out. So I don't know if that makes sense, but I can picture in my head the 3rd, 4th, and 5th edition books, definitely, and I can see them in my head. I can almost
that's just a difference in time, contents. Isn't it? When you're a kid, things hit harder like that in a way.
Yeah, that's true. But it kind of makes me feel,
These are the pictures that you're seeing in these rule books and stuff are the ones that, again, the next generation are like looking at whilst they're taking a shit and being like, "Oh fuck, this is blowing my mind."
But also the ones that stick in your mind, like I can draw you like pages from the 3rd edition rulebook because it's the first one you pick up. So for some kids, like starting on 9th, come 13th, when they're 30 plus recording a Warhammer podcast or whatever media is by then, they're going to be talking about the great images that they loved and the page furniture in.
Exactly. When all in 10 years time, when all the books are like holographic or whatever, and they're like, "Oh, do you remember the computer generated images in the like 15th edition rule book or whatever?"
What about you, Stoney?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Matt. Well, first of all, I just wanted to say quickly, it's quite interesting that you like this Blackstone Fortress thing, and how you feel like you guys are like one up on the game all the time. Like, because I remember playing what's the Age of Sigmar one, the tower, the old thingy tower, Silver Tower. Yeah. Like that was hard as fuck. Trying to play that like a couple of times with a couple of friends of mine, and I don't think we ever really got past the 2nd level. It was really fucking difficult. It's interesting that because I played some Blackstone Fortress with you as well, and it was just like a duck hunting show. We were just like, "Oh my god, there's some cultists around the corner," like zip zap poo pow.
Yeah.
Anyway,
more of an adventure than a challenge.
It's the news. Wow. It's the chuffing news.
Have you heard 6s are now 4s?
It's the news.
Gene Stealer Limo's back.
News. So do you guys remember Duncan, the personality that painted all the shit for Games Workshop, that he fucked off and did his own thing? Well, apparently there's going to be no more Duncans. If you're anyone doing any kind of painting for Games Workshop in the past, well, fuck that shit. You're out. You're just a pair of hands now, discredited, whatever, who cares? But everyone's up in arms about it. Only hands gate. What's going on? What's happening?
Yeah, so this has been picked up. We're probably a bit late to the party on this, to be honest, but I saw a Spiky Bits article about this week. And then that sent me back to the Painting Phase channel on YouTube that Peachy's on. So we've, big names that used to draw people in, I think, on YouTube and help with painting. Duncan, Peachy, and most recently, within the past couple of weeks, Louise Sugden have all left GW to pursue their own painting guidance careers on YouTube. And Games Workshop's reaction to this seems to be to move back to not really featuring their faces or their personalities and just having hands and voices and models in the videos, which is interesting to talk about. I think why they've done that. Do we agree with that? Does it make business sense, etc.?
Well, I mean, I guess that in a way it's funny. It's kind of like I mean, Matt said this a couple of times on a few previous episodes, where essentially Games Workshop is gearing itself up to be sold off to a much larger corporation. I'm learning. I'm absorbing your ways. So they're kind of, getting rid of these kind of wild cards. I mean, it's crazy when you have to be like, oh, Duncan was a wild card or whatever, or these kind of, these sort of more unpredictable features. Like, obviously you can churn, if you get a formula for like videos that people are going to watch, like it's coming from Games Workshop and it's just set hands, you've got your like rubber stamped approved personalities like James Workshop or whoever. You don't need people like Jez Goodwin coming out and talking about how he's a wizard now and he lives in a castle in the woods and this was all based on a mushroom trip he had back in the 70s or some shit. You don't need people like that.
Goodwin, and we love you if that's true, but
we definitely want you to come on and talk about all
please
that
do the
shit.
interview.
like come and disprove us, Jez. Drop the knowledge if it's really untrue. Jez Goodwin fucked a sheep. Come and disprove us, Jez. Like, see it on it.
Do not keep that in.
I'll put in some beeps.
But Stoney, you're right. I was going to say what I've said before about it being like
what I've said before, Matt.
Yeah, what you've said before. It's being fattened up. The pig is being fattened ripe so it can be sold off. But beyond that, I mean, I did watch this as well, the painting phase video, and I'd seen all of the stuff with Louise on various social medias and YouTube videos. It's really, I think it's a real shame that they've lost her, and they go into that in detail in the painting phase, and it's quite a nuanced. They have good arguments for and against it, but and I kind of agree with what they said. I mean, to me, it just feels a lot like work. That's kind of what happens in the world of work.
And part of me thinks from the business point of view, it's got to be fair, a bit of a kick in the teeth to train someone up and put someone on a platform for your company who then goes off and makes more doing the same thing after they've been promoted through you. But then, does that person owns the rights to their own personality and can sell it? And I can kind of see why people at Games Workshop would be annoyed, but also
can't have it both ways, because they do this thing where they train people up. That's their whole thing, is where they, anybody can apply for any position at Games Workshop, and they will, kind of essentially, if you've got the chops, there is a chance that you could get a job there. That's been a part of their hiring policy for ages, with Black Library, with their design team, lots of stuff. They have this going on. So they can't have it both ways. They can't be like, oh, we'll employ anybody, we'll bring you up and like we'll put you on this, and at the same time, if you get bigger than Games Workshop, then you're out on your arse. Do you know what I mean? That should, the whole point of bringing you up is that one hand feeds the other. Your success should feed into their success, vice versa, right? So it's great. It's crazy.
I guess that bringing people up and putting the time and effort into people then relies on the company being a happy enough place to stay and want to work, that those people then don't choose to go somewhere else.
Yeah, because they can just
go. I mean, that's it. There shouldn't be any hard feelings with. Is that what's happened there?
Well, I don't know what you think, Matt, but I thought there was quite a bit of not over the top saltiness, but some hinting in when you hear these people that used to work for Games Workshop talking about how I think it links with your big company coming in, that it sounds more and more like business managers are being pulled in and telling creatives what to do, and it's moving away from a time where creatives were in charge throughout the company.
I don't think it's necessarily creatives running the company. I think it is a slow and systematic change from being a medium to large company that's fairly traditional in Nottingham to a international, large, very large company that in the video they mentioned marketing a lot, and it reminded me a lot of my previous job, where in the space of 5 years it gets driven from an engineering and a creative design company to actually a company that's led by marketing and by sales and the bottom line. and at the expense of the creativity. But I don't think it's the company not investing in creativity. I think it's just that their priority is no longer necessarily building people up, like you say, Stoney. Because I don't know if it seems like it is anymore. It's the bottom line is becoming more important. The Games Workshop company seemed quite different even to what they were 10 years ago. But I, having said all this, I do know that Louise Sugden she's got her own YouTube channel now. She's done various videos, various posts. She's kind of made clear that she really enjoyed working at Games Workshop, and that she's not kind of coming out and being like, oh my God, it's really bad, it's this, that, and the other. I think she's given some reasons why she's moved on. I mean, it's her.
But I mean, this is kind of like
difficult.
Just how it goes. I've talked a little bit before here on the podcast about how I used to work as a goldsmith, and I've worked in like the creative industries all my working career essentially. And like this is just how it kind of is like you start working at a place, they teach you a bit, that you learn a bit here, you get a bit of experience there, then you move on. That's just kind of how these things go at the end of the day.
That's always going to happen. I think the conscious choice is there seems to be a conscious choice on the part of Games Workshop to where before they were happy to name and promote people, that now everything is made by Games Workshop, to the point where I believe people are essentially being told, if you're the guy that designed and painted this model, you're not allowed to go on your media and say you're the one. You have to say, I did this as part of a massive Games Workshop
that's all.
team.
But again, that's kind of always been how a lot of this stuff is. Like, that's how working in these industries is. Not that I'm advocating for that. I'm just saying this is how it is.
But maybe it's GW becoming the norm. Rather than not the other way around.
Yeah. I'm not trying to advocate for big corporations doing these kind of things, but this is just how this kind of work has been for a long time. Is like there's so much, like, I never expect to be credited on the stuff that I make for people and whatever. It just doesn't happen. I barely take photos of my own shit. I just take the money and I leave. That's just how being an artist is, or working in the art industries can be in this kind of current climate.
The last job that I did for 5 years, I've probably designed hundreds of products and had them made, but my name is on none of them.
Yeah,
and most of them I can't show.
You probably recognize even if you saw them out. You'd be like, did I make that? That's what I do. I do that quite a lot. Sometimes people send me pictures of stuff that I made ages ago. I'm like, what, is that one of mine? Who is this lunatic?
I probably would recognize them, but I can't talk about them or show them because I've signed NDAs many years ago. And so but then there's so many arguments for it, because then stuff is still done like that. Like you log into Photoshop and it's full of everyone that helped develop it. You put in, but see computer games and all the people listed.
This is kind of the difference in industries nowadays, isn't it? Because being an influencer is an industry in itself now, isn't it? So Duncan supports Games Workshop, like that doesn't work, does it, for Games Workshop? So they've got to. So what they're doing really is just trying to make themselves more marketable. They're making their painting videos a marketable thing that doesn't need a personality. It's like snooker commentary over watching a guy like paint a model, essentially, isn't it? It's just a factual breakdown of what's happening in front of your face.
Well, they did say that in a lot of the videos, that part of their thinking is obviously that you can access different international markets,
languages,
because essentially like it's easier to dub over and that kind of thing.
That makes sense, doesn't it?
But it sounds like both of you are saying, from your experience in this industry, that actually what Games Workshop's going towards is probably the norm. And the fact that they had this period of time where
if you want to get recognition in the art industry, you have to fight for it yourself. And but for sure.
Whether the norm's a good thing or not is a different matter.
That's what it is.
Exactly.
So 10th means new rules. New rules means we've got to fly through some new rules with you. Let's get some new rules out. Go, Welshie.
Leaders, that's a big new thing. Instead of auras, you put a leader in a squad, and the leader gives the squad stuff. Interesting, no big bubbles, no castling up your entire army around Belisarius. Cool. You pick a unit to put him in and he makes that unit better. The example they gave is a lieutenant, and it allows the unit that the lieutenant's in to fall back and charge. It's cool. You decide who he goes with. I'm not sure if you can move from one unit to the other during the game. That might kind of become clearer. but I quite like this. It means you're not bubbling, you're not chaining your whole army through buffs off of one character. I like that.
We're going back to I'm sure this is a 3rd edition thing. I'm sure that this is old Warhammer, which is
back in 3rd edition when it was
Yeah.
the perfect game and there was nothing fucked up about it at all.
And it never changed afterwards either.
11th. I have a prediction that 11th edition they will bring back armor values.
Okay.
Yeah.
My prediction is 14th edition is basically going to be snakes and ladders.
Transports, though, that's a nice segue to transports, Matt, because we've got some information about transports. Basically, they're all tougher. They all count for more objectives secured than they did before, which is cool, which is good. It's the way it should be. One tank should be able to hold an objective better than one dude. So they get more of these objective secure points. Firing decks are back. So there's just a standard rule. Different transports have different number of firing deck points, which is the number of models you can choose to shoot. It doesn't matter who it is. If it's firing deck 2, you pick 2 of the models that are inside it and they can shoot their guns.
Excellent. Missile launches.
Cool. Really cool. I'm sure I think they said the Orc truck is going to have like firing deck 20. So like 20 boys can fire out of it. They all seem to be tougher, like I say. Even like the Storm Speed has gone up to toughness 9. So I think the days of being able to take down tanks with small arms fire are probably over. You're going to need to bring anti-tank if you want to take down tanks, which again mixes up the board. You don't just have 500 bolters anymore. You're going to have to bring a las cannon like you should, rather than just bring in like 9 versions of the same elite troops. So Matt, I think you must be pretty excited about vehicles in general.
Yeah,
I mean, more excited about vehicles than usual.
I still actually haven't read anything about 10th edition, so it's kind of hard to say, because the only thing, initial thoughts would be, if they're making transports tougher, does that not mean that all the other tanks get tougher as well? And then it's
all the tanks are getting tougher. Armor's getting tougher, which means, you know, your armored things, your 9 Lehman Russ are doing pretty well. But let's hope they balance it out and mean that you need troops. And talking of Guard being part of the Imperium, they also released, this was sneaky, it wasn't in a 10th edition preview, it was in the Adeptus RBT's rules for 40k, that they seem, hopefully, fingers crossed for me, to have finally fixed the Imperial Agents rules, where your Inquisitors and all of your weird units that are hard to fit into armies, depending on the size, the number of points you're playing. So a Strike Force game, 2,000 points. You can include 2 retinue units and 2 character units that have the Agents of the Imperium keyword. And there's no other restrictions. So you could chuck maybe a couple of assassins, or an assassin and an Inquisitor, and like 5 Jacaro. So yeah, that's cool.
I think that is.
Other big thing that I was really excited they fixed is Psychic Phase is not a phase anymore. Thank God I never have to play a Grey Knights or Thousand Suns player and sit there for 10 minutes whilst they talk gobbledygook at me and I remove my models with no saves from the board. Those days are over. Psychic powers are just a rule on the data sheet. The Psychic can do that thing.
You've complained about Psychic Phase for a while and it's gone. It's out of here. Get them out of here. The bullshit.
Thank you, GW. I am a little bit sad because I also play a Psychic Heavy Army, Tyranids, that you won't be able to in your army building. Doesn't seem to be able to pull in different powers for different situations. You just get what you've got, but it makes life easier for everyone.
Double-edged sword.
Again, I mean, this is. I'm sure this is just old rules.
Old rules.
but yeah, it all looks good. It all looks good.
And talking of double-edged swords, Stoney, that brings us nicely to the new weapons rules, which I think look totally simpler. This is taking us back to 7th. Basically, weapons have keywords, and it's the same. It doesn't matter whether you don't need to write the keyword in a weird Eldar style. You don't need to write it in a weird Necron style. It's just the same keyword, so everyone understands what's happening, which is great. All of the bolt variants, which I think was up to like 4 different bolters you can put on intercessors, don't exist anymore. There is a bolt rifle, and you can either choose to fire it heavy or you can choose to fire it assault.
That makes sense.
Which means magnetizing 4 different bolter options on every single intercessor is no more. Thank Christ for that. Devastating wounds. Everything seems to be based on critical hits, which I think they've taken from other game systems. So you've got devastating wounds, which means if you hit on a 6, it does a mortal wound in addition. Melter is you add that much damage. So Melter 2, you add 2 damage. You've got ignores cover. We all know what that means. Sustained hits, which is your exploding sixes. So all of the various exploding sixes rules are just called sustained hits now. So sustained hits 2 means if you roll a 6, you get 2 extra hits. Simple, clear, on the data card in front of everyone. The only one that I think they've kind of messed up is twin linked. It's basically just not going to be as powerful as it was before. So things that have 2 guns.
Oh, you don't fire twice. Can you re-roll it?
Re-roll the wounds while roll.
Okay, that's what the 7th edition rule used to be, didn't it?
Yeah. There's lots of old favorites back here, but simplicity seems to be the key, and I'm very, very happy about it. And that includes terrain, which was overly complicated.
Excellent. Yeah.
All terrain does the same thing now. You get +1 to your save, and certain terrain gives cover to certain types of models, be they infantry, vehicles, monsters, etc. Very simple. Keep it this way, Games Workshop. We're all happy. Everyone's saying what a great time it is. Don't release 11th and fuck it all up.
Rolling in my 6-4.
The station with the best music. Best music.
I love the music.
Best music.
For the Emperor! K107.9, the Empire's best music mix.
That's right, Space Marines and Necromunda Queens. You're tuned in to K10769.57. That's hot. Broadcasting the freshest jams all around the universe from the Inquisitor Obi-Wan studios right here in the crabby crease of Olynisius' butt crack. The time is 5 o'clock, and that means it's time for Hot Chat with me, Larry the Squig.
The hottest DJ mixing the beats. Beats.
Today's topic is Lionel Johnson. We've all heard he's coming back, but what do you think about him? Is he the saviour the galaxy needs, or a beardy weirdo who looks like a disgraced CDT teacher? And will the fact that he's a distant relative of Boris Johnson affect his political acumen? Shit! Well, I can see the lines already lighting up, so let's take a call.
Blazing the steel.
Hello, Line 1, you're on the air.
I mean, I just can't believe that corpse starch has gone up by 17%. What is this inflation under Gilliman?
Good point, well made. Next caller.
Someone needs to get my neighbour to cut her trees. They're too bloody big. Get them down.
Yes, trees can be a problem. Make sure you respect your horticultural boundaries. Next caller.
Well, all I've heard is arguments for or against Gilliman or the Lion, when what we really need is to believe in the void touched. I've heard that the Emperor's really got 4 arms, and they're coming really soon.
4 arms just means twice as many hugs, so count me in. Next caller claims to have actually known the Lion. It's Malcador the Sigillite.
Of all the Primarchs, save perhaps Mortarion, Lionel Johnson stands apart. Partially this is due to his taciturn nature. A brooding silence hangs over him at all times, yet there is something more, something buried beneath his noble exterior. Perhaps this is the result of his upbringing, growing to maturity alone in the monster-ridden forests of Caliban. Even at the Council of War, the Lion moves like an apex predator. He is always watching, always planning, always hunting. He unnerves even his brothers.
Great stuff, caller. Thanks for your time. Now, did I hear someone say Call Me Maybe by Carly Rae Jepsen? Because it's coming up next, right here on K97.X32, the Empire's best music mix. So, Lionel Johnson. He's not Lionel Richie, the lion of R&B. It's Lionel Johnson, the Lion of Caliban. Like many of the Primarchs, he was a little baby boy, like scattered into the warp, and he landed on Caliban, which was a death planet, a feudal death planet. So bad luck, right? Like all the Primarchs, they have a bit of bad luck when he lands. And he basically lives his early life like kind of Ninja Mowgli, like living amongst the one of the things about Caliban is it's very close to the Eye of Terror. And ever since the birth of Slanesh, it's been affected by the warp energy that's coming out of the Eye of Terror and all the beasts that live on Slanesh, except for the horses that the knights ride for some reason, has been affected by chaos and made it all like these big fucked up beasties. So obviously our man Lionel Johnson, or as he was known then, Lionel Nothing, as a little babby on this planet, Mowgliing it up. Yeah, so he had to live and survive on there, and he came against some of the creatures of Caliban. And do you guys know anything about the creatures of Caliban? Do you want me to tell you about some of some of the creatures that he had to
know about some of them? I know they're all big and badass and horny and furry and mythical.
Well, it's a good thing that you said horn, Welshie, because one of the beasties is called the Horn of Ruin. which is a
Oh.
massive, multi-eyed creature with a large horn spouting from above its utmost left eye.
Ooh.
It is one of the most fearsome great beasts. And obviously, Lionel Johnson had to kick the shit out of a couple of those in his time. He also had to kick the shit out of a crag shadow, which is a winged creature, which is a winged beastie, a bit like a big bat. And obviously the Caliban lion, which is the most feared of beasties, but we'll get to that in a bit. So anyway, the Lionel Johnson's out there kicking back, being like a Mowgli type guy. And all of a sudden he's discovered by a knightly order of the Caliban, a knightly order called the Order, conveniently.
Yeah, convenient.
And stuff is a bit weird on Caliban at this time, because even though they're kind of like a bit futuristic-y in some ways, they've got some stuff from the Age of Strife, which I'm not quite sure what that is. That's a time in history which I know some people will know, but I know some listeners won't know. So do you guys know what the Age of Strife is?
It's when all of humanity is oppressed across the galaxy.
Well, there you go. Well, they've still got a few bits and bobs from this. They've got some shitty bolt pistols and they've got some fucking shitty power armor kind of stuff. But, but this is like top-notch stuff in their land, because everything else they've got is like they're riding around on horses, starting fires, eating hog roasts, shitting in a hole. Everything else.
It's proper Arthurian legend, right, at this time. Is that the kind of sense of what's going on?
Yeah. Basically, everything's wank, but they've got guns and armor. It seems like, yeah. And so they're also fighting against these like chaos beasties, and they come across this wild man in the woods, and they're like, we should kill him because he's like a wild beast. He's nothing but like a fucking beast of Caliban. He's been raised in the woods. And then one man comes forth, and that man is Luther, and he goes, "No, I will look after this young boy. Don't check my search history or nothing. I don't care. I'm gonna take this guy home, and I'll scrub him up in the showers. I'll scrub him up real good. Don't you worry about it. Don't ask too many questions. I'll look after this young wild boy that can't speak. Don't you worry about it." And he takes him home, and everyone's like, this is one of the things about the Order is like very different to a lot of the other knights that are on Caliban, who are all very, they're like, people are born into knighthood. They're all these weird inbred aristocratic families where they're popping out fucking weird brothers and sisters that are also cousins and aunties or whatever. Whereas the Order will take in anybody. If someone's able enough, they'll be like, yes, we'll take them in. And so they take him back. So that Luther takes him back to their big castle, which is called
Alderu.
Which is like a big fortress monastery. And everyone in the Order's like, we should kill this wild man. He's nothing but like a chaos-tainted, like, rugged man. And Luther's like, no, are we not the Order? We're not like snazzy fucking aristocrat knobheads. We're ready to take in anybody. Like, now don't come into my chambers for half an hour whilst me and this guy have a shower together. Like whatever Luther's reasonings was.
He doesn't just polish my armor.
He doesn't just polish the armor. He scrubs up. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But it doesn't matter what Luther's reasoning was, because this man was the lion, and he became known as Lionel Johnson. And he had been surviving in the woods all this time. And whilst he'd been surviving in the woods, there'd been all these kind of like little villages and stuff here and there on the outskirts that had all these legends of this like weird man-shaped shadow that would lurk in the woods, kill big beasties and stuff like this. So this kind of legend of a man that lived in the woods, a kind of Mowgli-esque figure that all stopped after the lion took into Luther's care and scrubbed up in the shower.
There's loads of them. Do you think that, like, oh, look at that glow up? This is that not the dirty, like, blonde kid we saw running around? Now he's come out and he's got a sweet set of armor.
Exactly.
He's got wings on his helmet for
he's glowed up
some unknown reason.
Yeah, what's that? Why has he got loads of Luther's lipstick marks on his neck? Who knows? Whatever it is, he's glowed up. He's made it. He's come up from nothing. He's worked his way from nothing. He's made it, and that's what they like to see. Yeah. No one could really work out how old he was when they found him, but he grew up very quickly, as most Primarchs do. So he was probably sort of in his early teens when he was discovered by Luther in his busy hands.
And they form a pretty good team, really, in the end, don't they? And they kind of,
well, that's just it.
People are kind of before they kind of get together, everyone's kind of a bit out for themselves. Knights going out on their own quests, killing their own beasts. Is that kind of
well? That's
right?
just it. It's all a bit disjointed until Luther and the Lion team up, and they make this kind of wonder team, and they start fucking bringing the Order together. The Order becomes the biggest knightly order, the most best run knightly order on the planet of Caliban. Obviously, the Lion is a natural leader. He's got his forest bride in Luther by his side, and he knows, and everything's going great. You know, this is maybe one of the interesting things, and maybe this kind of like his dad wasn't here for him kind of thing that starts to arise, is that because he's been kind of raised by the woods, he doesn't start to see that Luther is beginning to get a bit jealous of him. As he's bringing all the Order together and everything. Like, for instance, he starts this big campaign where he's like, right, basically the thing that's most fucked up on this planet is it's just overrun by fucking beasts, lions. These lions are Caliban, all the rest of it. We've got to just get out there and start a big crusade and fuck all these boys up. The Order's all into it. They start growing the Order because everyone starts seeing results. Eventually the Order gets so big, it starts pushing the forest back. It starts killing beasts. They start expanding their territory basically to the point where they can build fortresses and stuff in the forest without feeling like they're going to be attacked by beasts and everything. And they start getting all these new recruits and everything. And it gets to the point where eventually they've taken back the planet back over. What was a death world, what was written off as a feudal death world, all of a sudden is like a lovely tourist destination. It's like Center Parks there. You get down, it's fucking lovely. And Lionel Johnson is named Grand Master of the Order, which is where obviously Luther's chapter, who he's brought him into, he starts feeling jealous. He starts getting upset and everything. But the Lion has like literally no concept of any of this. Like all the medals, all the awards and everything he's given, he doesn't really care about any of it. He's like a Mowgli character. He doesn't care. So he doesn't really see the jealousy that's rising in Luther or anything like this. And again, it's kind of like he's overcome all these odds and everything, but he just doesn't have the right knowledge, that he hasn't been given the guidance to realize that someone like Luther might turn on him. You know, it's an interesting thing. I was reading a book recently about a pathologist for the Met Police, and he was saying he kind of ends the book with saying it's really interesting how many murders are committed by people who were close to the person that they murder, and it's kind of like the majority of the murders that he did, and that's kind of like here, obviously, spoiler alert, Luther's going to fucking turn, but Luther's going to turn, and he starts here. The seeds of jealousy start to kind of creep in right here, because he was a little boy that he raised up and scrubbed in the shower, and now all of a sudden he's big and he won't return his text messages.
Yeah. We should say what his name means, Lionel Johnson.
You're right. I have it written right here. It's Lion, son of the forest.
Yeah.
Because he was a beast. He was a wild man. He was Mowgli, Lord of the Jungle or whatever.
I think that's interesting. I hadn't thought about him like a Mowgli figure, but I guess he is. I mean, for me, I find it quite interesting because it is like Games Workshop created Bretonia in space with all the knightly orders and stuff. Quite an interesting world.
He also has the politics at this point is pretty good as well. Like he goes from being this kind of feral kid to getting the suit of armor to being touched up to being able to just kind of stride balls out into any other Grand Master's palace and say, "You're joining us." And then they just do. They basically
that's it. There is a
rebellion.
From the Knights of Lupus.
Well, sorry, yes, you're right. The Knights of Lupus. Thank you for bringing me up on that, because the Knights of Lupus did make a bit of a run, a bit of a rebellion, and everyone basically gets trampled over by the Lion in this. He takes no prisoners.
The Knights of Lupus were they had some sort of communion or were in league with some sort of chaos artifact or something on the world, because Caliban is, as you say, it's so close to the Eye of Terror. There's some weird chaos stuff beyond just the beasts.
I didn't know that.
They were doing some weird. I can't remember exactly. It's been ages since I've read. I think it's a Gav Thorpe book. All of this stuff.
There's a Gav Thorpe Luther book. Yeah.
No, but this is before. This is like early. I think Angels of Caliban
in the Horus Heresy.
I
think I listened to this one. Yeah.
They basically have I think they just chaos taint even more the kind of already chaos tainted natural beasts that roam the.
Well, yeah, and they have loads of books that are to do with worshipping demons and trying to bring in a demon into the world, and Luther gets hold of some of them and he keeps some. He keeps some of the books. The lion is like, we need to destroy all these books. Nobody open these books. Nobody read these books. Don't look at the books. And Luther's like, I'm going to have me some of the books. So he takes some of the books. Yeah. And maybe that's because he has the beginnings of the jealousy. And maybe he's like, I am not going to do what you tell me. I'm taking some of those books. So he takes them. Yeah. And then the lupus are crushed.
Yeah, well, they are the first to be crushed in what becomes a bit of a cheeky rebellion, maybe of other chaos-tainted households. As kind of a character at this time, he's sort of a bit of an unwilling leader in a way. Like, he wants to rid the world of all these horrible beasties and everyone to live in peace and stuff, but he doesn't really like the limelight. He's not like, he's a good leader, but he doesn't really enjoy... well, she said, he's quite direct with people. He comes in and just says what he wants, and all the rest of it. But he's
very
not really...
single-minded. That's kind of like, even early on, before you get descriptions of him in his kind of full Primarch powers, as he's very singularly focused, and he doesn't. I think that's a big difference between him and what he becomes and what Guilliman becomes. That he has no interest in being an emperor. He doesn't want to rule, but he leads naturally. He wants to lead, and he wants to save, and he wants to expand, but he doesn't necessarily want to rule. And I think that's the difference between them. Is the difference between a leader and a ruler.
Yeah. Well, he's like a hunter, isn't he? I mean, that's kind of him as a kid.
Basic. So him and Luther, they make their fortress monastery, basically. Is it called the Tower of Angels, if I got that right?
Yeah.
On Caliban.
Yeah, it means Tower of Angels. That Angular Caster.
Nice. Someone's been practicing their high Gothic.
Base.
So the Emperor comes down. He's like, hey, what's going on, Lion? L. Johnson, I'm here now. I'm your real dad. Fuck you, Luther, even more, you stepdad piece of shit. What happens, Welshie?
Well, sometimes when the Emperor arrives, it's like a real kind of schism or real kind of important development point in the Primarch's kind of emotion and where he goes. If you think about like him coming down and taking Angron away from being able to fight and save all of the slaves, and that really sets him off on a bad one. Or when he comes down and Conrad Kurz is like, oh, you're too late, father, and all of this stuff. Whereas this just seems like a pretty easy bog standard, hello son, oh, I see you're a knight, you're already kind of wearing armor, you already command loads of people, you're already killing all the bad stuff, here's a legion. And I think there's not that much to go into in that interaction. It's like king father meets long lost knight son, goes, oh, you're doing a great job.
He does his classic thing of arriving at quite a pivotal time, though, doesn't he? Are they not? I suppose
so, because there is a kind of not all of the knights are happy at the way it's gone. As you said, there are some posh knights that are like, oh, this isn't the way we wanted it to be, and aren't just going to lay down and accept the fact that this upstart kind of man of the forest is there.
Like you said earlier, Stoney, because it is a feudal system, they're basically their way of making wealth is kind of gone. So like, I think some of them are actually seeing that because the society has changed, that their hierarchy and where they are at the top and where their wealth is coming from the people from below that's all changed or changing. And it's a bit like, well, actually I don't want to be poor, I want to stay rich.
And I think that goes all the way through to when we start talking about his return in 40k, spoiler alert, is that kind of idea that Caliban is separate from everything else, and the systems of Caliban should be kept, and the traditions of Caliban must be weaved into the new world and the new gifts. But I don't think the kind of relationship between the Emperor and the Lion is really one of the key kind of Primarch ones that is just the way they talk and interact with each other has a massive impact. I think it is just, here's a legion, and he takes the legion on.
And do they get on, the Lion and the Emperor, then? Are they like buddies rather than, I mean, there's a bit of a ropey start with some of these Primarchs. How does the Lion take, this guy coming down? How more importantly, how does Luther take this guy coming down?
Well, I think Luther's a bit more pissed off because suddenly, he doesn't have to bow to him anymore, quite literally, from what you've been saying, Stoney, on his knees. he's kind of been given a hierarchy beyond Luther. I guess even to that point, although it's clear that the Lion has more power, he's still kind of Luther's son to an extent. And now, I guess the question is, which one's really the stepdad? Is the Emperor the stepdad, and now the real dad, Luther, is kind of like, oh, who's this fancy guy in gold armor that's kind of in charge of the entire universe that's come, and I've got a kind of I've lost my place in that.
It's like Joseph in the Nativity story, isn't he? Where it's just like, what? I didn't even get to bang, and now all of a sudden I've got a kid.
I think that's a really interesting point, though. I haven't seen anyone or read anything where people have asked that question, and I did listen to the audiobook we mentioned where he's growing up in the woods, because that's been out now for like 8 years. It's one of the first ones, one of the early ones. I don't know if I ever finished it, but so I don't remember the Emperor coming down, but I think it's a really interesting point about how Luther takes it. It's like Luther is like the Angron or the Primarchs that take it badly, potentially.
Yeah, I think probably the Emperor's appearance has more of a kind of long-lasting impact is through Luther rather than it is through the Lion. And especially because now that Lion's been given the Legion, and we won't go fully into the Dark Angels, it's just the Legion today because there's way too much on the Lion as it is. But he gets given this Legion that's fairly kind of crippled by this point. They're some of they are the first, and therefore they're some of the first Space Marines that have been going out crusading. There's a quote in one of the books that's something along the lines of, the Dark Angels are used to destroy a planet when it needs to be utterly destroyed and no one knows about it, whereas the Wolves are used to destroy a planet when it needs to be utterly destroyed and everybody needs to know about it. So they've kind of been waging this secret war of destruction for quite a long time, and they already have lots of secrets in amongst themselves already. So there's secrets on Caliban, there's traditions on Caliban, there's traditions in the first Space Marine founding that's gone out and is doing stuff, and he has to kind of juggle all of that, and he does because he's a natural leader. But as you said, Steady, I don't think he really wants to. And a key point I think in Luther's development is when they start recruiting all these bright young knights of Caliban into the Space Marines, Luther cannot become a Space Marine because he's too old.
Oh yeah.
So he doesn't become a Space Marine. He gets loads of sweet genetic engineering and armor and this kind of stuff. And obviously he's poked his nose in a few books in the library, which will be important later because there's a lot of lost knowledge on Caliban. But that's got to hit.
Yeah, I mean,
it's just like his consolation prize. It's okay, Luther, you're going under now for your surgery. Like, he's like, oh, I've been really pissed off. I couldn't be like, but it just wakes up and like, oh, I'm sorry, Luther, we couldn't make you into a Space Marine. You're too old, and I'm afraid we've shrunk your dick down to a thimble size. Like, we've sealed your asshole up to the size of a pin, so you've got to take really tiny, long shits now.
Spaghetti.
Yeah, but good. Thanks for raising Lion. I'll see you later.
Yeah. Oh well. Yeah. I mean that doesn't help, does it, Luther? But then at the same time, if you raise your child, I mean, I know it's not his genetic child, but if you find someone, you care for them, and you make them the one knight who unites all of the knightly orders, destroys all the chaos beasts, and is actually the son of the Emperor, and then is the leader of this amazing Space Marine Legion, you'd be like, look what I've done. This is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It'd be like the other guy from Wham.
Well, maybe it's the Chaos
like,
books.
oh yeah, you'd be like the other guy from Wham. You'd be like, yeah, I could call George Michael anytime I want.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's a handful. I guess the big impact of all of this happening on the Lion is he's now got two quite disparate, quite embedded traditional halves of a Legion to pull together. He's got these wonderful knights who aren't yet Space Marines but will become so, with lots of traditions of their own, that he's got a mix with this already quite experienced Legion. And I think he ends up fighting, like he has to fight the guy in charge of the Legion in order to prove that he fights
the leader of each company.
Yeah.
to not because it's like, oh, you need to fight me to prove it. He's like, we're gonna have a challenge,
duel. It's
fight,
like a proper
duel. Yeah,
duel. It's like
yeah, we're gonna have a duel,
slap you around with my dick because I'm in
and
charge
he wins.
now.
Yeah, and he
Yeah,
wins, and
of
then
course
everyone's
he
like,
does.
wow, I respect you. He's earning the respect.
But that's where, and even that early on is where we get some of the bits that we know from the game now, right? That you've got the
space
hexagrammaton, which is the funny star-shaped thing on his belt that we've also seen on Farsight's
Well, the
bloody
thing that
sword.
proves
Yeah.
that Farsight is actually Lionel Johnson. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's what he does.
Or maybe he's Luther.
But that hexagrammaton is the Death Wing, the Raven Wing, the Dread Wing, the Fire Wing, the Iron Wing, and the Storm Wing. Those various wings that, because the Dark Angels have been operating for so long before they find the Lion, that they've kind of got these structures in place that he does have to merge with things that already exist. And maybe that doesn't go down. Maybe they like 5 better on Caliban.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things where all the Primarch stories kind of essentially boil down to this idea of like having kind of greatness kind of thrust upon you, like kind of rudderlessly, because they do all spend their formative years kind of doing their own thing, whereas at the same time being these kind of superhumans, and it is like, the Lion kind of exemplifies that in a way where he's just kind of getting on with things and doing stuff. He kind of doesn't really kind of care about the sort of mortal world and the kind of social constructs of things, because he is essentially like a man of the woods,
Yeah, I think as well the order they were all about like honor and stuff. So maybe there's a part of him that has absorbed that to the point where he's like, the chivalric thing to do isn't to be like, I'm the boss. It's a bit like that. But and the
well, that's it. He has been guided to some extent by Luther, poor old Luther. He's got
no one was guiding Luther, obviously.
Because if he hadn't, if he hadn't had, like, what's the difference between him and Kurz? Is a Luther character, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
And not being able to see your own death.
The Emperor kind of, when the Emperor found him, it was kind of a big deal for the Emperor, because he's the first Primarch, not the first to be found, but he's the first to be made, which is why they're the first Legion. So it's like, for the Emperor, that was special as well. And maybe that helped as well, because unlike some of the other Primarchs that he was just finding here, there, and everywhere, they're kind of just like, oh, I've just found another one. But
we should do an episode
finding the Lion
on the order and how the Emperor feels after every one that he finds. That'd be quite good.
The Easter egg hunt.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, he gets the Legion. He goes off. One of the first things they go is the Rangdan Xenocides.
We should say why they're called the Dark Angels. Is that at this point? That's at this point,
he does.
We should. You're right.
They're named after an old Calibantine myth of shadow-clad angels who come from the sky to aid the people of Caliban in their time of need.
Well, I mean, it's also kind of touches on, they've got the Watchers in the Dark, obviously, as well. So there's a lot of dark stuff going on, stuff emerging from the dark, isn't there? So
it's a lot of secrets in the dark, a lot of trees,
in the dark,
a lot of monsters.
Exactly. Luther playing "Come Find the Sausage in the Dark," that kind of stuff.
So he goes out, he's got his Legion, he's started working things out, he's beaten down people that think they still want to be in charge. He's done what he's good at and leads, and then they go out and do these Rangdan Xenocides, and they basically lose loads. And I think it puts them under strength of some of the other big players at the time, the Ultramarines, the Iron Hands, Sons of Horus. They lose quite a lot, the Dark Angels, in these Rangdan Xenocides, in their kind of utter destruction. So the Rangdan were described as possessing sloth murder minds, suggesting they may have been a slave species to the sloth, which we've talked about before. They harvest the dead and any survivors that they come across.
The worm.
They're the kind of mimicry people, aren't they?
I thought, is it the Slough, or they're the worm?
Slough, yeah.
Aren't they the worm guys whose faces are they're like a robe over like a guy who's made of worms?
I
like maggots. They're
That
all like
sounds quite
maggot men.
interesting.
We've talked about them on 2 separate episodes, Matt.
We have, but I don't remember anything about them.
They're feared for their mimicry abilities, and their ships had a brutal appearance of spines and flails which dragged behind the vessels like metallic tentacles of
Yeah,
jellyfish.
so they are the worm people.
I don't know if they're worm people.
They're worm people. Their faces are like maggots.
I mean, they're just they're not
slough.
like they're not actually worms, but they've got like wormy bits all
God
over them.
Damn it. You guys suck.
Oh, Tony, I've misunderstood you there because they're like Oogie Boogie, aren't they? The slough. They're like made up of maggots. I thought you meant like Earthworm Jim.
No, they're not one big
worms
maggot. They're
with
many
maggots.
maggots.
Yeah.
Yeah. The fella's made of many maggots. Anyway, they're hideous, heretical Xenos, and that they should be exterminated. And that's what the Dark Angels underlie and go out and try and do first. But they do take heavy losses, which I think is a kind of initial scar to who a very proud knight's first attempt to move out into the galaxy, which I reckon's got to have a bit of an impact on him.
In the mix. Back to back, beat to beat. Come on, DJ. Hit me with another track.
Engaging the enemy.
Welcome back, orcs and dorks. It's Larry the Squig here, twisting your ear till 12 with some hot chat.
That's hot.
And on today's show, we're talking about the name on everybody's lips. That's right, it's Lion the Rock Johnson. He's back and he's here to stay, but what do you guys at home think about it? Let's find out.
Blaze in the steel.
Line 1, you're on with Larry the Squig. Lay some hot chat on me.
We've just got to do something about these nasty fallen fellas coming in and stealing all of our jobs. They keep landing on the planet. We need the Dark Angels in here. We need a quick shark.
Couldn't agree more. Next caller.
As a single mum, I just feel like I can trust the lion because, you know, I've got a lion tattoo and he's called the Lion.
Solid logic. Next caller.
Look, I'm not racist, but...
All right, that's enough of that. Cut that guy off. Our next caller is actually someone else who claims to know the lion. The Sandman himself, Sanguinius.
The lion is not like us, my brothers. He is a distant, solitary, and secretive, as though he holds within him a great burden that he cannot share. But in his heart burns a fierce loyalty to the Emperor, and a determination to see his will done, no matter the cost.
So there you have it, straight from his brother's mouth, ladies and gentlemen. Now who's ready for another 40,000-year-old classic? That's right, it's Psy, with Gundam style. So how did he get on with it with his brothers? What was his relationship like with his fam?
I think he was one of the first people to meet Horus, and they've kind of just had a kind of general mutual respect of each other. And I don't think there was much there, but there was a lot of friction between a couple of them, and one of them in particular was Lehman Russ, because I think they're both pretty similar in one respect, in that they're loyal, but they go about that loyalty in very different ways. I think you've got a pragmatism and a thoughtfulness and a focus with the lion, and then with the wolf, you've got unheeded kind of rage and aggression and fight and I think both of those fighting styles are very opposing to each other, and one will look down on one and the other look down on the other. I don't think they meld well together.
The lion's always described as kind of a tacticianer, isn't he? Like a kind of a planner, and someone that won't attack if he doesn't need to, or wait for the right time and all this kind of stuff, whereas the wolf's a lot more emotional, isn't he? He's a
good quote that flies around the community, which is that Lehman Russ may be the Emperor's executioner, but the lion is the Emperor's exterminator. That kind of goes back on what I think you said, Welshie, when the worlds that the Dark Angels would take, nobody really knows about, but the Space Wolves are what they use when everybody needs to know that a world was crushed. So they're kind of, I mean, I guess that goes back to the secrets. If you've got the lion going places where you taking stuff out, taking enemies out, taking planets out without people knowing, that's secretive. That's like secret ops. Whereas the wolf, the Lehman Russ, is just kind of in there screaming, shouting, and everybody knows about it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I know that within the Horus Heresy, there are times when they work together, and actually they often fallout. And it is on Dulan. They're trying to hold back, and the wolves rush in and fight, and the lion's giving them clear orders to kind of wait. There's a plan, there's tactics, and then the wolves just rush in and fuck everything up. And, you know, lion's not happy. He's one of the first ones that calls him the Emperor's lapdog. He's one of those kind of first people that says, you know,
oh shit, he starts the nickname that he hates.
Yeah,
he's the one that does that.
He spent days gathering intelligence in this fight, and he just kind of runs in and does what Russ does. I mean, in the end, they win, but they take more losses than they should have done. And there's this massive standoff where, it comes to blows, and this kind of fight between them is they actually fight. I think, but I can't think of an earlier bit within the Horus Heresy novels actually where two Primarchs come to physical blows.
Are they trying to kill each other? Like, I mean, is it like
it? I think it's like it's like your classic angry brothers.
Yeah,
and they're fighting, and the way he describes it afterwards is that the fight only really stops because Russ decides it's going to stop. Like Russ ends it in laughter. I don't think you could never claim, and there's these funny bits like after it happens in the books, I remember, where both legions are attempting to claim that their Primarch won the fight, like my daddy beat yours, and really there isn't a winner. The fight just kind of comes to an end because Russ bursts out into laughter and is like, ha ha ha, good fight.
Yeah.
Like the Russ probably is better natured in that instance, because when he does burst out laughing on the floor, the lion knocks him out. Not very chivalrous.
But still, like the laughter ends it, doesn't it? Because he knocks him out, but then it ends still.
The laughter ends the fight, and then the lion's still really pissed off and focused, so he just knocks him out. And that's why they have these honor duels. So Russ forever swears that he'll avenge the day that this happened, and now and ever on since that, when the two legions meet, they each send forward like one combatant to fight on behalf, to kind of not fight to the death or anything, but to kind of mark that occasion that they're different, and they know they're different, and they understand now that they have different capabilities and ways of doing things, but they're on the same side. And I think that's kind of, I just think that's really cool when they get together.
Yeah, and even the chapters in 40k.
Yeah,
it's been going on for 10,000 years.
Yeah, still to this day in 40k it happens. There's a wonderful scene in one of the books where they're all literally like the whole legions, and not just them. I can't remember the other legions there. I think there's some Ultramarines there, and everything stops. They're all about to kind of board the ships, and everything stops, and the wolf sends forward one guy, and the Dark Angels send forward another, and all of the other chapters are like, what the fuck's going on? These guys just fighting each other before we can go to war. Get up off of that thing! The lion knows, is one of the only Primarchs that has any inclination that Horus is capable of turning. Like hardly any of the other one. Lorgar obviously knows, but it's shock amongst almost all the Primarchs when Horus decides to turn against the Emperor. But the lion kind of sees it coming, but doesn't believe it enough to really fully prepare for it.
I think I read that because the lion is the first Primarch, he does have a very good relationship with the Emperor, and they kind of talk openly. And I think the Emperor basically, when he's deciding who to make War Master, it's kind of Horus or the lion. But some people have read into the books that there's an insinuation that the Emperor knew that Horus would turn, or knew that Horus could turn, and that the lion would be loyal, or the lion would be more useful not actually being the War Master, like let Horus fail. So made Horus the War Master, and the lion is kind of a little bit put out by that. Like he thinks that he should be the War Master, and other Primarchs think that he should have been the War Master. But there's an insinuation that the Emperor actually does speak to the lion about it, and the ruffled feathers are kind of smoothed back over, and that there's some understanding between the Lion and the Emperor as to why Horus was chosen to be War Master. So it's quite interesting that you say, Welshie, that the Lion thinks that Horus has turned. And I wonder if there could be anything with the
It's
Emperor.
not like he realizes that he is. I think he's just one of the few that thinks that he could.
He could.
I think it's beyond conception for so many others that it's even a possibility. Whereas him, I think he can spot.
Maybe the Emperor warned him or something.
Well, that's it. It's quite interesting, like, to think maybe the War Master is like a doomed title from the very outset, you know, because it's kind of like, you know, we talked before about like how in all the research I did, like the Lion didn't give a fuck about like titles and things like this, and then all of a sudden he cares about the War Master title. Maybe it's
like
but
what
I'm trying to say is maybe it's a bit like it's a bit like the Ring in Lord of the Rings or something, you know, where it's that kind of like cursed.
Let's just get back to Luther a little bit, shall we? Because what happens at a point during the heresy, during the kind of turn, is that the Dark Angels are fighting the Sarosh, who are a cool race. They're like super advanced technology humans that basically made it all the way through the Dark Ages with technology intact. So they're quite a strong force. And they attempt to assassinate the Lion. And this is where the real kernel of falling out goes with Luther. So Luther knows that they're essentially going to try and assassinate the Lion, and it's not with a sniper rifle, it's with a nuclear warhead. So they're going to do a nice quiet assassination using a nuclear warhead. And Luther finds out, and he's so jealous and pissed and old manny at this point that he hesitates in warning him. Now he still warns him and still foils the assassination, but the Lion finds out that Luther hesitated. And that's enough to plant that kernel of what side is Luther on in this? Can I really trust him? The guy that brought me up, maybe he's not everything he's cracked up to be. Now I know my real dad is the Emperor. And that's when he sends Luther back to Caliban. And he sends him back on the premise that they need to keep recruiting knights from Caliban and they need to keep the order coming. And that's their kind of job. But basically everybody under Luther that's sent back to Caliban kind of sees it as punishment. And a lot of the people that are sent back, not all of them, but I think the majority are Calabinite Space Marines. So not ones from Terra. So they're kind of seen as we're being punished. We've been sent back. We're kind of out of the fight. We're just babysitting the home planet. And I think that's kind of kernel that we'll come back to a bit later, that sets the seed for everything that happens. So Luther's kind of not around when the heresy is really kicking off and the Lion realizes, shit, I need to get back to Terra because it's all going to kick off now. And this is when the Thramas kind of crusade happens. And he essentially gets waylaid in a massive traffic jam. It's why he doesn't make it in time for the Siege of Terra, because he's fighting Prince of Darkness, Prince of Crows, Conrad Kurz. And he's chasing them all over the place. And they're doing this excellent kind of hit and run destruction that I suppose the Lion could just have ignored. And maybe this is one of his failings, that he has to go after this baddie. He is the beast hunter. He is the monster hunter, and he can't let. Granted, some of it's in the way, and they're being attacked, and they have to respond to attacks. But
it's I always like, it's almost like Kurz just gets in his head. He just annoys him. He just can't let him go.
It's that singular focus again. He gets locked on. He gets locked on to Kurz.
But the analogy of him being the beast, being one of the beasts, one of the Calabite beasts, I think that is true. Yeah,
he's a monster hunter, and he goes hunting this monster that's been essentially, it's a great move by Horus that he's unleashed Kurz and gone, do your fucking worst on the eastern fringes of the empire. I want you to be as horrible as you possibly can to draw this good knight savior complex night fella out into the eastern fringes and slow him down and get him away from where I want him to be.
He lives in his ship, doesn't he? His ship's called something like the Unshakable Vengeance or something daft, isn't it? And doesn't Conrad Kurz
Incomprehensible Reason or something?
Yeah. The incomprehensible reason. But anyway, he doesn't Conrad Kurz like live in his ship and
he hides. He hides.
He does a little bit of a hideout, doesn't he, in the ship? But that's a little bit later because he draws him out. He properly draws him out into Salgualsa, which is where the Night Horner is, and draws him into a meeting and gives him this like big prophecy about the future of the Dark Angels. There's lots of myth and legend and hinting at how they're going to fall, and there's loads of classic Conrad Kurz about how you're just as bad as me, you just won't accept it, like you've destroyed just as many worlds as me. Fear is a better and quicker and less painful way of bringing planets to compliance than demanding that they do so with absolute power. It's basically the fear versus power, and Kurz is like, I am fear, you are power, but we're both as bad as each other. We've both destroyed planets, we're both horrible monsters, which is Kurz's kind of classic line to any of his brothers. But he doesn't like it, and eventually they fight. There's a kind of back and forth, and there's a brilliant bit where Kurz is basically running rampant in Macragge and flips a Land Raider with his lightning claw, and it's all pretty badass. But eventually the lion gets hold of him and breaks his back, Batman style, and chains him up and keeps him. He refuses to kill him, and he keeps him chained up on, what did you say the ship was called, Matt?
Incomprehensible Reason. I think that's what we've all named it now. Yeah.
It's the Invincible Reason.
Oh, that's it. Yeah.
But Incomprehensible Reason is a good way of describing his choice not to kill
Kurz. Yeah.
But he can't do it. Maybe he does have some kind of pity for him. Maybe it's because he didn't have a dad and he sees that kind of.
Like maybe it's because the Dark Angels are super into imprisoning people for some reason.
Yeah, essentially. So there's the fight with Kurz. Kurz, like, the fight is really, I always surprised because I always think of the lion as like apex fighter. And the first time they fight, Kurz slashes his throat and the lion shoves a sword in his back, and they both kind of skulk off. I think there's it's been ages since I've read that book, but basically I think there's Sevatar kind of, it doesn't end with just the two Primarchs. It's kind of, there's the two Primarchs fighting, and then there's first captain level people fighting at the same time. And basically Sevatar gets there and interrupts the kind of killing blow, and Kurz slinks away with them. And then I think
Sevatar gets captured, doesn't he? He's on the ship that Conrad Kurz is sneaking around on, I think. Hello, Large Blast podcast listener. Editor Stoney here. So over the next 5 minutes, we tried desperately to piece together the information we had about this part of Lionel Johnson's lives and made a complete shit show of it. So here's a mega cut of that, and then hopefully a decent summary at the end.
Kurz just goes on a kind of rampage. He basically just can't get hold of him. Lands on Ultramar.
They go to the planet called Sotha.
Vulcan's also there, and it's just a mess.
Something happens to Gulliman fighting in space with Kurz.
The entire battle of them kind of fighting Kurz is a trap. Pharos, that has this capability to teleport them at the last moment away from the blast.
So it saves their lives.
Which saves them, essentially. We're fucking butchering this whole section. One of the big brothers that he really doesn't get on with is Kurz, and that's because Horus has this amazing idea to unleash Kurz on the eastern fringes and let him loose and destroy everything that's there, and that drags the lion away because he loves saving people. So the lion goes after Kurz out in what becomes known as the Thramas Crusade, eventually catches up with him and almost kills him. Kurz slits his throat, the lion stabs him in the back, both escape. Little does the lion know that Kurz is on his ship. So Kurz is stalking and causing havoc on his ship. The ship has to go to Ultramar and land on Macragge because he's being summoned by Gilliman. He's seen the Pharos lighthouse has been turned on, and it's a beacon drawing the lion in towards Gilliman. He lands to talk to Gilliman, and little does he know that whilst he lands, Kurz sneaks off of the ship, off of the Invincible Reason, and starts causing havoc all over Macragge, flips a Land Raider with his claw, and draws the Lion and Gilliman into a trap. They're kind of stood on top of a tower, and Kurz plants mines everywhere, blows the tower up. The tower's destroyed, and you think, oh my god, the two biggest Primarchs are dead. But actually, the lighthouse isn't just a lighthouse, it's a magic teleporter, which Matt used to think is something to do with Necrons.
Yeah.
So they're saved, they're teleported away. Kurz is still running rampage and causing all kinds of issues. At this point on Macragge, weirdly, after Kurz, if you've been following the Kurz storyline, he's been killing Vulcan over and over and over and over again. And Vulcan has coincidentally landed as a meteor because he's been thrown out of the ship, and he crashes onto Macragge as a kind of crispy meteorite. But because he's invulnerable, gets back up, and in a complete kind of zombie rage ends up fighting with Kurz too. Anyway, Kurz escapes because that's what Kurz does, and needs to be chased down even further. Eventually the Lion catches him, breaks him over his back like Batman, and chains him up. And this is where kind of Sanguinius catches up with the Lion and Gilliman, and they form this kind of triumvirate conference. They start chatting to each other, and Sanguinius wants to learn from Kurz. So Sanguinius goes and tries to use Kurz's ability to predict the future to kind of clarify his own ability to predict the future, and asks what the Lion's going to do with Kurz. And the answer that they all come up with together is not to kill him because there's been too much fratricide, but they're going to turn him into a space icicle pop, and they put him in stasis and they fire him out into space. And that's where the Kurz Primarch book kind of kicks off. And it's at that point really where they decide they're going to send Sanguinius off ahead to Terra, whilst they kind of sort out what's going on in the Imperium Secundus between the Lion and Gilliman. So that is a hard come-by summary of a lot of us chatting and a lot of cut stuff, but that's what's going on in that position.
The only thing I'd add is that when the Lion meets Gilliman, he nearly kills him. And the Dark Angels nearly invade Macragge because the Lion sees that Gilliman hasn't moved to help Terra. He's created what he sees as a second empire, and he's made himself the emperor effectively in the 500 worlds. So the Lion meets with Gilliman, and he is half expecting to call in his troops to kill everyone, and he's expecting to kill Gilliman. He has a chat with Gilliman, and he says something along the lines of, Gilliman says, "You thought I was a traitor, didn't you?" And the Lion says, "No, brother, I think you're much worse." The insinuation is that he hasn't even fallen for chaos. He's actually just fucked everyone off and gone and created his own empire. But then because of everything else, they kind of make amends and it's okay.
So yeah, all of this kind of waylaid, fighting the Night Haunter, saving people in Thramas, trying to catch Conrad Kurz, deciding what to do with him, being angry that Gilliman's essentially forming his own empire, delays the Lion. And that's the key point, I think, when we start talking about the Lion in modern 40k, is the regret of not getting to Terra on time. He gets to Terra too late. They arrive too late. Sanguinius is dead. The Emperor is mortally wounded. Horus is dead. It's all gone to shit. The good guys have won, I suppose you could say, to some extent, but he's pissed that he didn't get there in time. And racked with grief, he goes back to Caliban. And this is the kind of end of the story for him, because who's left on Caliban? Angry Daddy. And he's been getting
Luther.
angrier and angrier, and he's bored of training recruits, and he's had his nose in the books in the library.
Yeah,
because
he's had his nose up something in the library.
The Lion gets there, and this is the kind of point of contention, and it's the mystery of the Dark Angels, and it's what's being explored in modern 40k now, is what happens when the lion gets there. The lion's in orbit. The people on the Dark Angels on the planet that aren't in the upper echelons see the lion arrive and rampage and destroy and kill loads of Dark Angels and think, what the fuck? The lion's turned to Horus. The lion is in orbit looking down before this even happens, looking down, seeing them using all of their chaos powers that they've been, well, not chaos, but warp powers that they're not supposed to be using after the Edict of Nicaea, and thinks Luthor's turned to chaos. So the lion's looking down at Luthor, Luthor's looking up, everyone thinks everyone else is turning to chaos. It all goes tits up, no one trusts everybody, and the whole thing culminates in a big fight between Luthor and the lion. And that fight gets to the point where Caliban is blown to pieces.
The biggest chunk being the monastery, right? The temple monastery. It's the only bit left. The rock, the bit that's left.
That is the only bit that's left. And no one knows at that point what happens to anybody that's destroyed. There's a big warp storm. Some people disappear. Some people's bodies are found floating through space. No one really knows what's going on. Nobody is 100% sure who betrayed who, although it's becoming increasingly clear from a reader's perspective that Luthor was turning to chaos and the lion definitely wasn't. But everyone thinks the other person had turned to chaos unless you are either Luthor or the lion. And that is where the kind of story ends for the Horus Heresy for him as a Primarch.
So what happens to him? Does he, after the does he remain on his spaceship? He just goes to bed? I mean, yeah, exactly. What happens to him?
Well, this is the kind of interesting bit with where we're at with it now, is that for a long time in the lore, it was said that they recover the lion, or the lion's in stasis on the rock, but it's never proven. It's all kind of rumors. The lion's having a nap in stasis on the rock for 10,000 years. But bringing us right up to the modern day and the return of the lion, that might not necessarily be the case.
I smoke weed, eat pussy every day.
In the mix. In the mix.
Hi, this is Britney Spears.
What up, this Jay-Z.
This is Jennifer Lopez.
The mix. With the hottest DJ.
We will crush the enemies of the Imperium.
Larry the Squig here on K77 77 76. I'm manning the phones and listening to you guys moan on Hot Chat. Here with Larry the Squig on K345 278. And we've been getting really into the topic of the lion, taking your calls, finding out what you think about him, what you think about his return.
I'll be back.
So without further ado, let's hit these hot lines.
Bring the heat.
You're on the air with Larry the Squig. What's on your mind, Cooler?
If he thinks he can come in here and tell me what to believe, tell me to stop believing in the Emperor as a god, well, he's got another bloody thing coming. I'll tell you, we're going to rise up at the moment's notice.
Praise be, brother. Our faith is our shield. Next Cooler.
In response to that confused moron that thinks that the Emperor is the one true god, I can tell you, if you get down to your local Twisted Helix Centre and have a few chugs on the old Void-born energy drinks, you'll realise that the Void Touched are coming. You'll hear silence, you'll hear nothing, and you'll be happy. Four-armed Emperor, you heard it here first.
Excellent chat. I renounce my faith and join the Voidborn.
I was born under the Emperor's lack, and I'll die under the Emperor's lack.
Praise be, you've shown me the way. I'm back on board with the Emperor.
Well, you sound like one of those people that just refuses to take the vaccine. It's outrageous. I went down and had 6 today at my local Twisted Helix vaccine centre, and I'm looking greener than ever. In fact, I can even sense something growing on my forehead.
Well, I'm conflicted. Hopefully this next Cooler should help shine some light on the subject. It's only Conrad Kurz.
The lion is a warrior without mercy, but he's also a man without vision. He cannot see beyond the next battle. He cannot see beyond the next objective. He has no understanding of the greater war that we fight.
Oh shit, Cooler. Greater war that we fight is the K527 phrase of the day.
Mix it non-stop.
That means you win today's grand prize, a bucket of scrap metal and a tour of duty with the Imperial Guard. So to celebrate your new career, here's Suicidal Tendencies with Join the Army. Get ready for spoilers in this part of the show because we're going to be talking about some of the new stuff. That's right. What is the lion up to in 40k? We're specifically going to be ruining a couple of the. Was it the new? Is it the
Lion, Son of the Forest by Mike
Lion,
Brooks.
Son of the Forest? There we go. So, what's he been up to? He's been away. He's been living in the mystical warp woods as part of a kind of a weird dream, right?
Well, that is the strange thing. So I have listened to this book. I've done my best to get through it. I listened to it on 1.5 speed to get all of the facts for you guys out there. So you don't have to, although I would recommend it because it was quite a good book. Horus Heresy lore would have us believe he's in some kind of stasis on the rock. This blows all of that out of the water. The book starts with the lion waking up, as you say, a hint out there, Stoney, in some kind of warp-esque Caliban, I can't fucking say that word. Dark, creepy wood dream.
Yeah.
Okay. He's in some dark, creepy wood dream. There's a king sat on the riverside fishing, and there's a little watcher telling him not to go near the king because the king's surrounded by lots of dark shadows. And then the lion kind of steps out of the woods and he's in a place, and he's in like a real place. And he stumbles across some people that need rescuing from, guess what? What do you think these people might need rescuing from?
Warp. No, it's a
lion.
Fallen.
A lion, essentially. A big old beastie is attacking them. Big old beastie. And he rescues him for the big old beastie. And he's not quite sure who he is. He's got amnesia. He doesn't know what's happening. He looks at his reflection in the river and sees that he's old, and he knows he shouldn't quite look like that, but he's not sure where he's been or what he's been doing. These people that he rescues say, "Oh God, you're wonderful. Look how big and strong you are. Let us take you to our protector." So they drag him along, and guess what their protector is?
That's the Fallen.
It's one of the Fallen. So the lion stumbles across one of the Fallen called Zabriel. They're going to run out of ways to end words in real at some point, that's for sure. And that begins what essentially, I won't spoil the whole thing, becomes a getting the gang back together story of the lion going round with the help of this first guy that he finds, re-recruiting the Fallen, but not the kind of chaosy Fallen. Turns out there's loads of Fallen around that generally are loyal to the Emperor still, except they lead these horrible lives running away from what they call their little brothers. And they're all different ages because the warp storm has spat them out at completely different points in time. So some of them are like 700 years old. Some of them are like 30 years old.
This is the warp storm that helped to break Caliban apart.
Exactly. So everyone got sucked into that, has got spit out across space and time. And there's lots of them that are still good and are there doing good work, kind of saving humanity on the planets they find, but they also have to run away from the modern version of the Dark Angels, which are trying to chase them down and eradicate them, and won't take I'm actually doing good work as an answer. And they're terrified of, not terrified because they're Space Marines, but they're avoiding that.
How can you be terrified if you know no fear?
Exactly.
But that's what they interrogate the modern 40k Dark Angels, don't they? That's what Stoney was saying about their interrogator chaplains or whatever.
So the modern 40k have been hunting the Fallen for ages, and I always kind of think of that as they're going after chaos tainted Dark Angels that have been spat out the warp. And this book really drives home that there's a lot of Dark Angels trying to live their best lives.
Yeah. I think there's even a part, isn't there, where one of them says to the lion, "Hey, won't everybody think that we're like all chaos tainted and stuff?" And he basically says to him, "No, I know I can see into your heart, and I'm the fucking Primarch, and I basically speak for the Emperor. So so if anybody comes to you with that shit, you tell them to ring up fucking Lionel."
Send them to me.
I mean, that is really interesting, because for literally, like, I don't know, 20, 25 years, whatever, there have been that kind of dual, when people talk about the Dark Angels, or someone is a Dark Angel fan, and then everybody says, "Oh, you're a traitor," and then they say, "Oh, we're not." And some of them like knowingly collect armies of Fallen, and there's Cypher, which nobody knows what he is, whether he's a loyalist, and it's quite interesting how it does shine quite a nice light on that.
I think this book does a really good job. I think the main plot points in this book are quite obvious. You can kind of work out where it's going, but it does a really good job at showing the perspectives. So it's told from kind of three perspectives. It's told from the lion's perspective, from kind of normal people, and from what the first fallen that he finds, and also kind of fourth, which is Seraphax, who is, or Severax, one of the two, who is a proper fallen, like Dark Angel. His head is literally on fire, Legion of the Damned style. His tabard is covered in glowing runes, and he has this thing called this band called the 10,000 Eyes that he's collected, and he's still under the impression in himself that he's doing good work, and that he's trying to save the galaxy. So it's told from that point of view too. So there's a real Chaos Warlord. There's a guy that works for the Chaos Warlord that's refused to accept any of the Chaos boons, that's really annoyed that all of his colleagues now are smelly and horny. And then there's this Sabriel character who is kind of working with the Lion as the Lion's new kind of right-hand man. And you've got to remember that a lot of them, even though they're good, hate the Lion. Because if you were on Caliban and you didn't know what was happening in the upper echelons, you would have seen is the Lion coming down and butchering your men.
Yeah.
And they hate him, and they turn up and they're not sure about him, but he wins them over with words and leadership, and basically has a full-on either join me or don't, I don't care. But if you hurt people, I'm going to kill you. And it's really like a kind of blasé, I don't really give a shit. If you want to come and join me, do. I'm going to do my best to save the galaxy. If you want to carry on your weird hiding life, go ahead and do that. And it's I think it's shaping up to be quite interesting.
Well, his return is pretty insane, right?
So yeah, like he obviously doesn't know anything. The way this book is written is that he has no concepts of anything that's happened in the past 10,000 years. So there's a wonderful bit where he's asking them to explain what's happening, and they're saying, oh, well, everyone kind of worships the Emperor as a god now. And he goes, the what? Worships him as what? This is outrageous. But he quickly turns away from, I thought they were going to explore that more and get into the civil war that we all hope for between him and Gilliman. But he does go quite practical and realize that actually he has like 10 men and that he needs to just get on with things. There's been no interaction in this book of him with the priesthood or anything like that, really. So he hasn't really come into concept of that. And then there's another wonderful bit so there's just one other bit in there that is great, where they explain to him that Abaddon's still around. And he's like, what? How's Abaddon still around? And they're like, oh yeah, he's like as powerful as a Primarch now.
Oh man.
And the guy's like, Lion's like, I don't really believe that. That sounds ridiculous. And they're like, no, really, he destroyed Cadia. And the Lion just looks blankly at him because he doesn't know what Cadia is.
Cadia is, yeah. That's great.
So that, it all builds up. He tries to get the gang together, and then right at the end is the big spoiler. Mute this now if you don't want to hear this bit. The epilogue involves him meeting up with Dante, and that's going to be the storyline going forward in 40k literature. Is going to be Dante and the Lion versus Imperium Secundus.
Well, have you heard the stuff from the new Imperium Secundus book? Well, I don't know what it is. The new book.
It's the
Arc of Omen. That
happens after this. Yeah, it's nuts.
Yeah,
this is where the Arcaphane comes in. Vashtor.
That's right. Yeah. Vashtor's back, and he basically creates he basically rebuilds Caliban out of all the pieces of Caliban, doesn't he? Yeah, so he rebuilds Caliban out of all the pieces of Caliban and makes a kind of a weird, warped, bizarro kind of wish.com version of Caliban out of all the bits of it that's all kind of overrun with weird, chaosy stuff. Because there's something on Caliban that Vashtar wants.
I think... Yeah,
there's an artifact
from what I've seen, it's part of the key. Yeah,
it's one of the keys. Like the last thing he needs to
and he hasn't got that yet. No.
Yeah, he hasn't got that yet.
So maybe that will be the next novel, which will be quite exciting.
Caliban is basically the actual planet is like a chaos artifact, or it's 3 chaos artifacts. I think he gets.
Yeah, he does get it.
They get it. Yeah, they get it. Yeah, he gets
it. But basically, he like kind of makes this big what they all kind of know it's a trap, but they all go there anyway, the Dark Angels, because Caliban is he's like made this bastardized version of Caliban. They all see it and get really pissed off and go into kind of what is a little bit like a kind of a blood rage, a bit like a kind of a Blood Angel style blood rage. And then Dante shows up with and he
with the lion.
He shows up with the lion, but the lion immediately leaves to go and do some whatever. Like he forest walks out of there and goes and starts fucking shit up on the ground. And then Dante has to give this speech to because all the Blood Angels, all the Dark Angels are trying to still be kind of secretive about it. So they're like, what,
Right.
what Caliban? What are you talking about? Well, that looks like a demon Caliban. So they're all being real shifty. And Dante's like, hey, by the way, Primarch's back. And they're all like, can you prove it? And he's like, no, he's gone. Sorry. So he's he's in this really awkward position of being like, hey, remember that thing that you didn't think would be possible? Well, it's happened, and he's gone out now, and he's fucking stuff up. So he ends up summoning he ends up going down, and fucking Angeron comes out there. He finds all this stuff, and him and Angeron end up having this massive fight, which lasts for 10 minutes or something in real time. But for Angeron, because he's not spilling a bunch of blood, it feels like it lasts for a decade or something like that, because he's I'm not killing it. So he's getting really pissed off with this battle, because he's not just slaughtering everybody. So they have this big fight. Do
you know what happens? I don't actually know what happens at the end of that. I mean, I guess, does Angeron get banished?
Well, I think that what happens is, I guess that Angeron gets banished or goes.
He doesn't die now, does he? He just comes back 8 years, 8 months, 8 things later.
So you'll have to excuse our shoddy retelling of this story, which is all we're really doing is spoiling it for people and not really giving you the actual facts. But I'm pretty sure that Vashtar ends up getting what he wants in the end, because at the very end of it, even though Abaddon has resummoned him and everything, he's just starting to be oh, I kind of like this guy. The very last kind of sentence of the book is Abaddon turns over his shoulder, looks at Vashtar and gives him a little cheeky wink or something like that, and they're both okay, cool, there's a little bit of a friendship bond happening between them, even though they've been kind of partners in crime this whole time.
There's a couple of interesting things from all of that, I reckon. One is the forest walking, which is obviously the lion's now gone into the forest, and I still don't really know how I feel about that in the book. It's a bit
so it's warp travel, isn't it?
It's a bit it's a bit, but it's kind of guided, and there's this presence in there that's kind of just seems like the Emperor, and it's full on magical weirdness. So he goes into it and he finds the sword, and he goes into it and he finds the shield. It's
I mean, that's
it's a bit kind of lame, but I guess that's where he is now.
It's funny it's funny that we talk about him as a knight and stuff, and we go about the Knights of the Round Table and stuff, because that really does feel kind of tacked on mythology to him in a little way, which is a bit like this kind of wandering into the woods and stuff as well, because obviously that's very kind of King Arthur and stuff, oh, I got a sword out of a lake, oh, I found a fucking I lifted up a stone and found a shield, or whatever, all this kind of dumb shit. So there feels a bit like it's kind of trying to tack on that kind of I am the house of Bavarian or whatever, kind of mythology.
I think there's a bit of that, and the book itself, like I say, I think it is definitely worth a read, because all the perspectives are really good. And actually, the bit where he goes and gets his shield, he basically fights all of his brothers. So he talks to all of his brothers, and they all basically come at him from different perspectives. And there's a really well told story of how he kind of comes to terms with everything that's happened, and then the shield magically appears. But it doesn't really explain anything, the book. That's
the classic.
He wakes up, there's no explanation as to where he is in 10,000 years. It sounds like the kind of, I don't know how many pages the Arcs of Omen book is, but probably 20-40 pages within the big chunk of book.
Nothing.
Contains more exciting stuff than this book in terms of big reveals. I kind of got to the end and I was like, oh, there's not really a reveal here. I know he's about to team up with Dante because the models have just come out together. I don't know where he's come from. The only really reveal from the book is there's more good fallen than I thought there was, and he can do this weird shit where he walks through forests now.
The like I was listening to someone talking about the book, and the like you mentioned the interaction with like what could be the Emperor in the warp. I think that's really interesting, because that is one of the clearest details in a novel in the 40k setting, where the Emperor is seemingly guiding his son, like he's testing
some kind
the lion.
of presence.
Yeah, and it's like he knows what's going on. He's in this other dimension, but he's guiding his son so that his son can interact in 40k. Watches in the dark.
So like the first time he tries to approach the old man with the crown, which would imply the Emperor, the Watcher in the Dark, is like, no, don't go that way. You're not ready for that yet.
A whole thing in that book where they say, is there not like they say don't go into the water or something because the man fishing is on an island or on a boat or something?
Yeah, there's lots of like
the lion
misdirection.
But the lion is like, oh, I'm going to go over there and get him because he didn't respond to me. And the guy's like, don't go into the water. And then he's like, oh, why is this guy not answering my questions? So it kind of suggests like maybe the water is the warp or something,
There's
and then it's this kind of like he says, hey, why isn't he answering my question? He says, oh, you're not asking him the right questions or something like that.
There's lots of, that's what I mean, it's all kind of mystery. And it's like, I liked it because it was well written, and I liked the perspectives, and I liked the history, and I actually liked all of the characters. But in terms of moving the story forward, it didn't really. The lion's awake, he's gone to get some mates. And it sounds like all the big, exciting, explosive stuff happens in this Arcs of Omen book, which to me is a little bit sad, because I listened to this book for 15 hours. I don't like some of that.
I don't think you can like those kind of books are just not well written. It's like
the Arcs of Omen ones.
Yeah. I don't think that.
But I would have liked that. There's the bit where he meets Dante right at the end is amazing, because the lion loses his shit. He's like, who are you to wear Sanguinius's face? Like, because he's got the death mask on, and Dante just bows to him immediately and takes his mask off, which I don't know if he does that often.
No, that's cool. Yeah.
And the lion's surprised because everyone else has like asked him something to check that he is really who he is, and Dante's like, the fact that you immediately knew that this faceplate was your brother and the way I saw you react makes me trust you immediately.
Yeah. That's good.
That's cool.
We should add that it kind of weirdly, this has kind of been building up for the Dark Angels for the last few years, because it must have been the book that I mentioned earlier by Gav Thorpe. There's a book about Luther, set in 40k, which came out 2 or 3 years ago, where
I think it came out literally just after we interviewed him, or just
maybe.
Yeah, because I've got it on my Audible library.
Oh yeah,
for some reason I've tried to listen to it a couple of times. It's not good.
I like it.
He escapes, doesn't he? So Luther escapes from the Rock because he's been held prisoner in the Rock.
Link into anything. It's almost like, okay, so
there's no Luther.
You're not gonna in this book tell me anything that's happening in the actual 40k kind of box set storyline. You're not gonna tell me anything about Luther. You're not gonna tell me anything about Cypher, because there's a Cypher book that was released but hasn't been released other than limited edition yet. So obviously that's supposed to have been out after this one. You're not gonna link any of these strands together, and you're gonna throw in a load of stuff that gives him a rule on the table where he can deep strike. It's a bit like, where's this all going? And I hope there's a kind of next book that pulls all of these strands into an interesting story and builds on this really interesting. There's also no real bit where like the modern good Dark Angels find them. They spend ages. Oh, I'm on the run from being interrogated, but you don't none of that happens either.
Well, that happens in the new one, the Arcs of Omen or whatever, where they, eventually Dante convinces them that Lionel's back, and they all sort of like, rally and kind of fucking kick shit out of a bunch of chaos stuff or whatever. But yeah, it is funny. I mean, the lion's a weird one, really, because like before we started doing the research for this, I was like, oh, he's kind of like a boring one. And then when I was doing the research and when we've been talking about it, I'm kind of like, oh, okay, maybe there is something to this guy. And then as we're getting more towards the end and I'm trying to think back through what we did, I'm still like, you know what? I can't really think of anything that really makes him stand out that much from the others.
I think he's, as a character, he's in a lot of pivotal moments. But actually, I'd much rather listen to a Kurz monologue or a Khan monologue or a Mortarion monologue.
He feels
or a
necessary
Korax monologue.
Because he's like the knight, and they're all kind of space knights, and they've got a bit of this, but it's kind of at the same. And the story is cool. We've got this big foresty thing and all the rest of it, but it's somehow it just doesn't kind of gel together that well for me in some ways. But I am glad that he's come back. I do like his model, and I love the deep green color of his armor. So yeah.
I think the way to summarize him and the Dark Angels, which we'll do a whole episode on at some point, just as a faction. Sometimes in story, you can have too much mystery and not enough resolution. You can have too many plates spinning and nothing really grips your soul about it.
Yeah.
Because all you're doing is waiting for the mystery to end. And if the mystery doesn't end, it just gets more complex.
Well, that's kind of
it's
it.
Not very, it doesn't make you feel great.
I think particularly now that they've kind of unveiled the Fallen as what they are, as some of them basically being chaosy and some of them being kind of misunderstood Dark Angels, it does feel a bit like, where do you go next with the Dark Angels now? Do you know what I mean? It's
which is why I think the way to go is civil war. We have this strand to make stuff different. Give him enough power to actually challenge the way the Imperium is being run and make that really interesting.
I don't know.
But we don't know what's going to happen.
What do you not know, Matt? What do you think?
I don't know about that. I don't know about the Civil War, but I think it's funny what you've both just said in the last 5 minutes, because in a way it's like it's classic, isn't it? How the storyline's moved on, but it hasn't moved on. The Dark Angels are the same as they were last year, even with their Primarch pack. The Games Workshop have somehow achieved being able to blow up half the galaxy, rebuild Caliban, destroy Caliban again, bring the Lion back, the Primarch of the Dark Angels, have Luther escape, have some of the Fallen be identified as potentially loyalists, and yet at the same time the Dark Angels are exactly the same as they were. And I guess like the Civil War, you know, they're gonna have to just write the story as everyone gets on with everyone else and it's all fine and they just fight chaos. Otherwise there'll be much.
When I knew the Lion was coming back, I was really excited for where the story could go. And where the story has gone so far has not made me more excited. It's probably made me less excited. The opportunity for story was extremely promising. And I still think you can get some good books, some good novels, some good tales out of this, but I don't think it is as ground shattering within 40k as I'd hoped it was going to be.
Yeah, I think that's fair. You know, they're an interesting chapter, shrouded in mystery, and in some ways, the more of the mystery you strip away, the less interesting they become. But I've got to say, I do love that Primarch model.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
If only you could get one, eh? But essentially,
Cool.
I was in a queue outside Games Workshop. There were only 2 people in front of me who walked in, and there were 2 on the shelf.
How many people were behind you?
None.
Oh no!
Oh man, that really sucks.
And this is after, it wasn't for me, it was for my mate. And this is after he had it in his basket on the website, and then the website crashed. And loads of people lost it. Yeah, no one got one. And
the
now
mystery continues. Cha-cha! They brought it back by actually trying to buy the model. Doesn't actually exist.
They're going for 169 plus on eBay at the moment. Our scalpers have got it.
Breaking celebrity news here on the Imperium's best radio station, Free 7.9.T Radio. Is the Lion using furry-themed rub and tug massage parlours? New information says he's on the prowl. On the prowl for a tug job, that is.
Oh my God!
That's right, listener, don't touch that dial. This is DJ Larry Squig with Hot Chat here, but this chat just got a whole lot hotter if the claims from our last cooler are to be believed. Take it away, cooler.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
I saw him get a tug job from a lass dressed as a lion.
So there you have it, conclusive proof right here on K107.9. The lion, not just by name, but also by tug job preference. So thanks for tuning in, Eldari and Drakari. I've been your host, Larry the Squig, and this has been Hot Chat on K74.